Thank you, and that will help us with the sounds and all the that we have in our homes. So I would like to thank you and sorry for the troubles of the communication for this WebEx, but now we are together, and we wanted to do this meeting. We are going to begin and saying hello and trying to explain that we wanted to do this quick WebEx conference. And just to know the way we are facing this pandemia of COVID-19 in all the countries. Let me tell you that this is the third conference that we have, a WebEx that we have. We have two, one Wednesday, one Tuesday, and this one is special for the Caribbean countries, and we wanted to do it in English, of course, just to have some conversations to see the way that we are facing this pandemia. I will, if you want to say some words. The idea of this agenda, I'm going to tell it quickly. So the idea is I'm going to
mic is muted. Mr. Campo, your mic is muted. So if you are still speaking on mute.
Okay, now. Sorry.
Yes.
So, do you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. And so I'm very sorry. I'm going to begin just to tell you welcome. This is our this WebEx. We wanted to launch it with the Caribbean countries only. This conference is going to be held in English, of course, and the idea is just to know the way that we are facing in our countries, and with also to this pandemia of the COVID-19 that we are facing. So the agenda that we are proposing, if you agree, is to have some words with, from our colleague Philomen Harrison from CARICOM. Just after that, to hear some words, I'm going to give the voice to Susie Foster from Canada, just to talk about the results of this quick survey that we wanted to launch, that we launched last week, and just knowing about that our countries are facing this pandemic. And after that, I'm going to ask very quickly to give us a summary of the Federico Dorin to give us a summary of the WebEx that we had yesterday with the economic surveys from the Spanish-speaking and Javier, también very quickly, just to know the WebEx that we have for the household surveys that we have on Tuesday. And after that, I will give the voice to William. I don't know, William is now connected, is now connected, and then and just to talk about something about the ICP that is very important for the Caribbean countries. So with that, and after that, we are going to open the floor to give the to all the countries and the ones that want to speak. If you want to speak, please announce. Use the chat just to know, and then I can give you the voice. Without, as a reminder, just to shut down your video, and if you are not talking, just please mute your microphone. Now I'm going to give the voice to Philomen Harrison, and just I'm going to mute my microphone, Harrison.
Okay, thank you, Rolando. I'll be very brief. Just to thank you, for this initiative to bring the countries of CARICOM together. We have been in touch, so that as Susie does the presentation.
Hello, Harrison, are you there?
Yeah, hello? Hello?
Philomen Harrison?
Yes, hello?
I can hear you. Yes.
I can hear you. Maybe it's a problem with your audio, Rolando.
Yes, hello?
Yes, I can hear you as well. I think it's only Rolando who can't hear you.
Okay, so
I think Harrison has trouble with the connection again.
Susie, I'll hand over to you, so apparently Rolando is not hearing.
Well, why don't we try to, so Susie, can you begin with the survey, please?
Yes,
and then
I
after
will.
that, when Harrison will be connected. So.
Yes, I can. Can you hear me? I think we are all hear Dr. Harrison. I think it was only you. And can you hear me, Rolando? I'm assuming that he can't. So hopefully, maybe someone can text him and give him the information. Maybe the sound is only on his side.
Sorry, yes, I am writing to him. I
Okay.
don't know if he's looking at the messages.
Okay. Sometimes it's hard. There's so many.
He can muted as well.
Okay. So we're going to start slowly with the survey results because he has seen those, so he doesn't need to have that. But before we do that, I'd like to say a few words on behalf of Mr. Anil Aurora, the Chief Statistician of Canada, and myself and our team. We would like to make sure to wish you and your family the very best during this difficult period and trust that you are doing well. And I know that all of us are working harder than ever to adapt and prioritize during this unprecedented global crisis. This has taken a significant amount of effort and ingenuity from everyone. It's very heartwarming to see all of the extraordinary efforts that have been made by everyone in the Caribbean community and the ICLAC community to make sure that the flow of good information for those working to keep our health, societies, and our economies safe is in fact greater, and that those in charge can make a good decision and use resource efficiently information that we're trying to provide to them. It's challenging, but we're up to the challenge as much as we can, at least in the heart of everyone, and the resilience that we have seen in the region in the past, and I'll cover that a little bit in the survey results. We're really looking forward continuing to work, to share, and to learn with the community forward, and this chat with everyone is just one of many ways that this can be achieved. So I'll try to go fast and really go through the survey results so you can see the COVID-19. I think I'm sharing the screen, and I think you should all be able to see the first slide of the PowerPoint presentation. It's the COVID-19 and its impact on statistical operation in the region. So this is a quick survey that the CLAC Secretariat launched last week to just try to see a little bit touch base of where countries we're at in terms of the impact and the effort. So information If you scroll up in the chat, you'll be able to see a link because the information is also available on the Shiny app. So if you want to see the more detail of the information, or I'm sure that if you want to have a copy of the presentation after the fact, that was going to be easy to do. So you see on this slide the countries that have responded to the questionnaire. I thank everyone that had a little bit of time to do that, to do the response. Obviously, there's so much to do right now that it's very why some were able or didn't have the time to respond. Hopefully, we can share some of the information in the call today. Maybe we all know about non-response. Everyone who responded had some sort of health emergency. Maybe that's one of the reasons why people were more compelled to respond. But it should still be noted. On the next slide, you'll see at what phase of country when they responded, at which phase they were at. And this is something that if it's redone, it's going to be interesting to see, because this was done last week. If I'm only comparing in Canada, I mean, every day we have a little bit of stronger measure. So a lot of countries are going from phase 1, very light, maybe basic hygiene information is being shared, to the more advanced phase up to general curfew, maybe at the phase 4. So there's a lot of progress. So every day, and I'm assuming every week, and I'm assuming that it's similar for other countries, we see a progression there. So this one's going to be interesting to show through time. There was a question about which statistical operation there were difficulty obtaining information from the respondent, and it was mostly 70% really coming from surveys, but still a lot of challenges, more than 40% for records, and then maybe a little bit for census, but we'll go into the census results in a little while, so maybe we can explain that a little bit. So speaking of the census, one of the reasons why maybe it was not as affected is that in many field work was not started, was imminent in some cases. In some cases, it's scheduled to be done later in the year or even next year. But it's all below 25%. You'll see those who had started. So it's probably when field collection has started that we see the most impact. There was a question. So those who had answered that they, so these are the results for those who had said yes. If they had to postpone some of the field work, and you see some impact as well. A few had to postpone. No, are you seeing my pointer? Yes, you are a little bit. So you see for population housing, for agriculture, businesses, and other census that may be going on, there were a few that had to already postpone some of the work. We ask everyone if they had to postpone the census, what it would be easier to do it at another date in the year, to suspend the year completely, or to switch to a different mode. And the vast majority said just to do it, but in another date in the year would actually be it would be more feasible than other option. Switching last minute to other mode may be challenging for many. Maybe we can hear about your thoughts on that when we open the floor a little bit later. The main difficulty in conducting the censuses that the countries who responded experienced because of the emergency, vast majority was from mobility restriction. A lot of other as well, but really 70+% was because of the mobility restriction. And you'll see that this is a pattern that's repeating itself with all of the different challenges and difficulty that were faced. A lot of others, maybe when we open the floor a little bit later, you can share what are the others, the difficulty that you're experimenting. If we switch now to a household survey, you'll see that there were a lot more field work that had started. So compared to the census, where it was below or around 20% for all cases, you see that population and housing survey, living condition, they're really almost higher than 50% in all cases that had started. So there might be a little bit more effect there, and you can see that in this slide as well. The postponing the field work that needed to be for household survey, more people answered yes than in the census. these are all for those who had started something, a little bit like for the census case. If they had started field work because of the COVID-19 emergency, there was a need to postpone some of the field work, and you see that for more than half of them, there was this need reaction to the crisis. What is more feasible if it has to be postponed? Again, doing it at another date in 2020 was the vast majority of response, with about 80% of the country's members who responded indicating that. Switching to other mode was a little bit more feasible than in the census case, with about 40% saying that it might be more feasible to do that, and suspending it maybe at 10%-ish. We had that as a result. And the main difficulty, again, the mobility restriction comes up in first place, but also the rejection. Almost 50% of countries indicated rejection as a main difficulty. So it an indication that there was citizen and resident have maybe other things to do, or maybe just don't want to be in contact with anyone and answer. Still a strong issue related, as you see as well, at almost 40%. On the business survey side, you see it's a little bit in between the census and the household survey. So there were a few that were on the field. Your country already started the field work and business survey. You can see that it's more percent, a little bit less, a little bit higher than 30% for the various kinds of business surveys where there was some work in the field that had started. And for those who had to started, you can see again an impact, again a little bit in between the impact of the census and the household survey as to the number of the proportion of countries who had to postpone some of the field work in business survey all over the place. If there was a need to postpone, what would be the most viable solution? What would be more feasible? Again, do it and another date was also dominant in terms of answers. Switching to other mode, similar case as what we're seeing in the household surveys, and suspending is a little bit less viable. Feasible solution as indicated by the respondent. The main difficulties in conducting economic surveys because of the COVID-19 emergency. Again, strong issue related to the mobility restriction, but we also see the closing of establishment coming up quite strongly at almost 50%. And be reminded that this was done last week. I'm assuming that if it be done this week or even next week, if we're following the news, you see that more and more countries are imposing more closure of businesses. So this is something that might be increasing as time progresses. Finally, the fourth component of the survey is related to prices. We asked people if their country had already started the price collection for March 2020, and a vast majority, about 80%, said yes. And how much of the price was collected? So you can see here the percentage of the survey that was achieved in the first fortnight of March, and you can see a majority at more than 50% done, but about 25% of responded that said that they had less than 50% of their price collected at the beginning of the month of March. What is expected as the survey achievement for the second fortnight was a lot less than what had been done in the first fortnight. Less than 50% is what was expected at the end when we are including what could occur in the last part of the month. The main difficulty related to collecting price, the mobility restriction, kind of the similar scenarios as in the other area. But now we're seeing insufficient human resource being the second most important difficulty, closing of establishments, shortage, and others. So we see different type of challenges that occur in price collection. And again, it's probably a few of those that will be higher as time progress, as are closing more and more in many countries, and shortages are also likely to increase. There were questions about previous experience related to crisis of that nature, and we have a few respondents indicating various situations that occurred in the past related to hearing some back noise a little bit. I'm not sure if people can put themselves on mute. Thank you. So some example of things that had occurred that had prevented field work in the past: hurricanes, earthquakes, and national strike, other natural disasters, and mass protests were all example. So there's ways that we can learn from the past and carry on some of the lessons learned. Maybe it was not to the scale and scope of the current crisis. At least we can borrow from some of the things that were done in the past. What we've seen in the past and what I've been impressed at seeing is just how much resilience there was, both in the population but also in the workers of NSOs to trying to achieve what was achievable in various challenging situations. And that's it for the survey results. And I think the next part would be to give the floor to country representatives and to see if you want to express your perspective and your consideration on the impact of the COVID-19, what it has and what it will have on statistical operation and on possible solutions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Susie. Thank you very much for the presentation. And now, following the proposal agenda, I want to give again, and I'm sorry, to give the voice to Philomene Harrison just to express some words about the CARICOM and the way that they are working. CARICOM, Philomene Harrison, you have the voice. I'm going to mute my microphone.
Okay, are you hearing me now, Rolando? Rolando?
Perfect now. Sorry.
Okay. All right. Well, I was just thanking you for this initiative. Actually, of course, like many of you, we are working from home for some time now. You know, coming up from New York, of course, I had to self-quarantine, you know, and we have set up a task force. We are in contact with the countries, and they have been making certain requests, for example, to how to do surveys online, and also how to do surveys by telephone if there's such guidelines. So I just want to throw that out, and perhaps let us hear from the country about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Philomene. Now, I want to give the voice very quickly. Federico, if you can tell us what about the WebEx of yesterday, please.
Yes. Thank you, Rolando. My comment is very brief. Just like to list some of the measures implemented by the countries of Latin America and discussed at yesterday's meeting. The implementation of the teleworking modality, suspension of field service, conducting interviews via phone and web, enabling a web version of the form, direct communication with the user, delivering information through web-based social networks, the imputation of missing prices. ECLAT has pointed out some of the challenges that are going to be presented in the coming weeks, and that will particularly affect the price surveys in April. We have received a request from some office about organizing new virtual talks. Finally, I would like to mention that we have received documents related to the compilation of the consumer price indices and sent by the ILO, from the IMF, and Eurostat. Thank you.
Thank you, Federico. And now I would like to give the voice to Javier just to tell us about the WebEx that we have for the household surveys last Tuesday. Javier?
Yes, thank you. Hello, colleagues. Just as a brief summary, on Tuesday we had a virtual meeting. We had presentations from ILO Statistics Division and from two countries, Chile and Dominican Republic, which were mostly on the impact on labor force surveys. As a brief summary, one of the topics discussed and presented was about the change in the mode of recollection. Countries are trying to use telephone interviews instead of physical interviews, but there are challenges because this practice has not been common in the region. And in many cases, it has been difficult to obtain the telephone numbers. Most of all in cases where there is a new sample, and this was going to be the first visit, have not obtained the phone numbers yet. In some countries, they have the possibility of obtaining this information from administrative records or from the census, but this will work mostly for urban areas, not so much for rural areas. Also, presenters discussed the need to reduce the questionnaire, try to keep it below 20 or 30 minutes maximum, but it implies, of course, losing a lot of information, and some difficult questions, such as those related to income, will have to be dropped. And finally, a little bit of other strategies was discussed. For example, resuming the field work after the special period is over and visiting the missing sample from previous weeks or months, and even asking them retroactive questions. So that was a brief summary of the content. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now I would like to give our colleague from the World Bank, William Vigil Oliver, just to tell us some considerations about the ICP. William, are you in the conference?
Hi, good morning, Rolando. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfect. Go ahead. I'm going to mute my microphone.
Perfect. So first of all, thank you to ECWAC and the CARICOM colleagues for organizing this virtual meeting. Staying safe and healthy during these crazy and turbulent times. In terms of the ICP 2020, which, as the name suggests, has the current year 2020 as a benchmark year, what I can tell you is that we, the ICP Global Office team at the World Bank, have asked all regional entities around the world that are part of the ICP, the regional coordinators, which for Latin America and the Caribbean is ECWAC, to give us feedback on how they see the situation in terms of the feasibility of continuing or of carrying out any price collection in the countries in their respective regions this year. It's important, I guess, to recall that the ICP is a global program. And currently the situation could vary a lot in terms of each region's capabilities, especially maybe Asia is more impacted than Africa currently, but we also don't know what perhaps Africa is planning for the next couple of months, given what could come their way. The ICP Global Office, we're compiling this information from the regional agencies this week. But we will send this information, the summary information, to the ICP Governing Board. As some of you know, the ICP Governing Board is basically the ultimate authority, the ultimate stakeholder of the ICP. So it will be them who decides on the operational modality and how to proceed for the ICP 2020, given the current situation. So we are just compiling this information from other regional agencies this week. And hopefully we can send this to the governing board of the ICP as soon as possible. And we can get more clarity for both the regional agencies, ourselves, the global office, and especially the countries on how to proceed during these times. So that's basically the summary from our end. Marco Risanen from the global office is also connected. He's my colleague. So I'm not sure if he wants to add something else.
Marco? I think it's not connected.
I think it's connected, but basically, yeah, that is a summary from our side. And give you more concrete information right now, but we're all just took us by surprise, like everyone. So yeah, so let us compile the information from the regions, and of course, regional information comes from the countries, and we hope to give you some better guidelines as soon as possible. But again, the decision will reside on the desk of the ICP governing board.
Perfect, William. Now, I would like the Kieran Walsh from the OET. He wants to say some things. He's an specialist from the Caribbean, and he wants to say some words and to share some information with us. Kieran, are you there?
Yes, thank you, Rolando.
And are you going to share us a presentation, isn't it?
Well, I can give a brief oral overview. I don't need to go through. Perhaps I'll leave it to your judgment if you want to put it up. But we can share that through the website, the Shiny, afterwards for people, perhaps.
Perfect. Go ahead.
So yeah, I suppose my expertise in the Caribbean comes from the fact I'm married to a lady from the Dominican Republic. I'm actually in no other way would I consider myself an expert on the Caribbean, but I've been there a few times. So putting that aside, the last ILO has been gathering information from countries about their responses and the impacts of the virus and the crisis. We now have information from approximately 100 countries, particularly it's about labour market statistics in general, but most specifically about the LFS. What Javier already said about ECLAC gives you a good idea of the type of challenge that countries are facing. The impacts and the responses are different very substantially by country, depending on the systems they have, the capacity and the infrastructure that they're using. But all countries are facing a major challenge regardless of their level of capacity. And in particular, countries are reporting that there is a difficult balance to maintain between trying to have some continuity, trying to maintain quality of data, and trying to respond to the demands that are there now. But there are some patterns that I just will mention. Already it's been mentioned, like in ECLAC, the biggest single issue is the mode of data collection and the ability to continue with field operations. For those countries who are using face-to-face interviewing as their main mode, and that is 80% of the countries that responded to us in 2018 when we got information about this. Most of them, if not nearly all of them by now, have suspended field operations. There are still some countries in Africa and Asia that continue to do face-to-face interviewing, but that number is falling all the time. Some of them are suspending collection until a later date, but many are attempting to move to telephone interviewing or web interviewing, as has already been mentioned. But the type of challenge that creates is very different depending on your existing infrastructure and the availability of contact details, as we already heard mentioned. If you're currently using face-to-face interviewing with pen and paper survey, that is a huge challenge because you quite likely don't have any contact information, plus you don't have the infrastructure for telephone interviewing, so you're basically sending interviewers to their homes, trying to find contact details and telling them to do it by telephone, And that's a very, very big challenge to maintain response levels, to even make contact at all, right? So there's a huge challenge there. Now, and there'll be a huge knock-on effect of the fact everyone is working remotely, right? Because you have to get this data back, enter it, process it, and so on and so on. So a whole new system effectively has to be established for the process in very short order. So big disruptions can be expected. For those who are currently using computer-assisted methods, maybe CAPI or CATI, they still have challenges, but at least they may have the processing systems and the electronic data capture capability that will make things a little bit easier, but it's still a major challenge. Now, we do have some countries where the impact is relatively less, let's say more developed countries who are already using telephone or web interviewing. Some of those, especially if that's the entire system, are saying the impact is relatively low. Possibly they already have very good registers of telephone numbers. I mean, I recall one Scandinavian country actually saying that they've had an increase in response rates, but that's a very minority position, I would say. For most, there is some concern about retaining response levels for various reasons. So particularly where a first interview was normally face-to-face, in order to get contact details and cooperation, that's a concern for nearly everyone. We also have to note that just the disruption in general working capabilities that's been created because of teleworking and so on, of course, that has a major impact on every step of people's process. Everyone is trying to adjust their practices, basically. Some people are intending to implement web collection, and that's potentially useful, but it requires careful development. So we shouldn't expect it to solve all problems. It needs to be developed. A lot of experience is showing that if you have it as your only mode, you're going to get a very biased and small response level. Typically, you're only getting 20 to 30% response rates on web interviewing. So it can be part of a solution, but I think unlikely to be a solution on its own. We have some additional issues. I'll be very quick here, just to say that countries are seeking guidance on how to treat the situations respondents are now reporting, because it's very clear that nobody anticipated a disruption as significant as we are now seeing. So, for example, so many people suddenly being laid off, and then potentially not clear if it's temporary or not. I don't know if any of you have seen the very recently released data from the US on people claiming for benefits, registered unemployment benefits. It's increased by something like 3,000%. I mean, it's gone from 200,000 in the week of the 14th March to well over 3 million in the week of the 21st of March. So there is clearly a huge disruption here, and it's not necessarily immediately obvious how to treat all these cases in line with the standards that didn't really envisage something as major as this, right? So we are working on guidance to give to countries on how to treat people in different circumstances. We're hoping to deliver something early next week on this, along with the information I'm sharing to you about the challenges countries are facing. This will not be a change in core definitions or standards, but it will be clarifications of how to treat people depending on what you're seeing. So another point that's quite consistent across countries is that additional analysis beyond headline indicators like employment and unemployment is absolutely critical, because these indicators will not be sufficient on their own. They might not even move in the anticipated way immediately. So additional information about numbers of layoffs, working time, reasons for absence, if people are not searching for work, the reasons they give for not searching for work. Basically, looking across the questionnaire and the data you have for types of analysis that will supplement the focus on key indicators you always have. that will be absolutely critical now. So that's another thing we're trying to produce some quick guidance to countries on to support good communication to users. Also, additional instruction and training is needed for interviewers as well about how to handle situations. There is talk of countries adding questions. This is something else we're looking at. Not everyone will be able to do that. In fact, some countries are talking about substantially reducing labour force survey questionnaires in order to try and maintain response levels. But some are looking in the opposite direction at adding extra questions to try and target the COVID impact in a very specific way. In other words, asking very direct questions about, is your reduction in hours due to the impact of COVID, and so on and so forth. It's something we're looking at, and again, going to try to produce something on in the near future, but we shouldn't assume everyone can quickly react to that and add questions, right? It's going to be enough of a challenge to maintain your operations going at all, even with reduced information. So lastly, I'll just say that, yeah, countries are doing a lot of different things, but broadly speaking, these are the type that are being faced, and the level of impact is very much to do with the infrastructure that's currently there, which might be a longer term lesson that telephone interviewing, web interviewing, flexible survey designs, these are things that are helping people cope with this situation, but no one is exempt. Everyone is being impacted. Another final point I'll make is that other data sources, countries are going to turn to these increasingly if they're available and useful, like administrative data sources. Many governments may well introduce new schemes. It will be important to have a conversation early about the ability to extract data from those schemes to evaluate what's going on. And maybe improving the type of information available from administrative data. Balancing against that is the fact that in many countries, if government offices shut down, that administrative data itself might not continue to be available. So really, the level of impact is incredible, and there is no very obvious single solution. So really, our message at the moment is everyone is facing huge disruption and challenge. The LFS is not typically designed to be a rapid reaction tool, and at the moment I think countries who manage to maintain their operations and continue to produce data of reasonable quality will have achieved something important. And if you can supplement your analysis with, let's say, a focus on additional elements from the questionnaire, like reasons for absence, that will be an important contribution. And if you can go beyond that and add some new questions, well, okay, that will be great. But really don't underestimate the challenge of maintaining what you're currently doing. And in some cases, even that won't be possible at all. There will be complete disruptions in data collection. And as Javier mentioned, some sort of imagination is going to be needed on how to fill data gaps that are created after the event, for perhaps retrospective surveys, this kind of activity. So the ILO, look, we'll be working on this, we'll be issuing guidance, we'll be continuing to gather information and make it available, and yeah, we'll try and support as best as we can the difficult challenge everyone's facing. Thank you.
Thank you, Kieran. Now, as Susie mentioned, so we are going to open the floor, and then after that, we are going to ask Susie if you can share some conclusions about the talks or the presentations or the countries are mentioned, if it's possible. Yes.
I'm listening.
Stephen?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
So, Stephen Norwood from UTA, Department of Statistics. I joined the meeting late and I apologize. My question has to do with the labor force survey. A colleague just informed me that before I entered the meeting, the topic had come up. One thing that we're considering in light of this crisis is to utilize the same sample that was utilized in November of 2019 to conduct our May 2020 labor force survey. Two representatives think of that approach. The reason that we're doing this is that the telephone database that we have proven not to be able to produce reliable statistics soon. We have to supplement that enormously with field work or interviews. We are anticipating that it would not be good policy in May 2020 to send interviewers to knock on the doors of households. And so we're moving towards the thinking of utilizing the same sample, because when we conducted the survey in November, we were able to collect telephone numbers for the households that we collected information from. That's my question.
Thank you. Anyone more wants to participate? Rafael, I don't know our colleagues. Can you repeat again very briefly, because we didn't hear very well. So the question, Steven, because we have a lot of noise. Can you repeat it again, because they are asking our colleagues.
Okay, I can repeat it. So the question is, what do colleagues think of the Bermuda Department of Statistics using the exact same sample of households that it used in November 2019 to conduct the May 2020 labor force survey? We conduct the survey using field work primarily. And during that process, we collect the telephone numbers of households that we collect the information from. We do not want to send field workers into the field in May 2020. We would prefer to do it in the office using our telephone system. So the question is, should we use the exact same sample for households for whom we have contact numbers to conduct the May 2020 survey?
Lando, this is Kieran from ILO. If it's okay, I could perhaps offer something on that.
Perfect. Go ahead, please.
Not a bad idea at all, in summary. You always have a concern with repeated visit to households that you might have some level of attrition, but versus an option of, putting people in a dangerous position by sending people to the field, which is clearly not realistic, I think, at the moment, are trying to put together a register of telephone numbers and getting a very low level of response. It's going to be a much better option to use an old sample. It's not without some problems. It's not something we would recommend under normal circumstances to keep on revisiting, because you'll have attrition, you possibly have some sort of influence of the old interviews and so on. Yeah. But in the circumstances you're in, it's not a bad option, to be honest.
Okay. Yeah. So that was our thinking. That was our thinking. Recognizing the potential pitfalls. There is going to be migration within the country since November, and we're not likely to be able to cover the entire panorama of households that we need to cover. So the next question will be, what approach would we recommend for replacing those households that we cannot interview, primarily because they're not resident in the particular address that we need to survey?
Okay, great. Anyone wants to participate?
I'm Carol from Jamaica. Can I come in?
Yes, perfect. Hello, Carol.
Okay. To give an update to the situation in Jamaica. We were not impacted by the surveys that we had between January and March. Our problem is the April labor force, and we have cancelled it. Our next labor force survey is in July. And what we aim to do is maybe add some additional questions, which you might have the recall issue of what happened to persons, say, in April. Also have some administrative data, which we'll be looking at to provide data, but that only covers the formal sector of the economy. Our problem is the prices, though. The April prices, because we are now on the revising this new CPI basket. And so for April, we're not sure what is happening. So our option using the IMF's recommendation, we'll also be adding to that, looking at web scraping, see if maybe we can get some prices for April. Thanks.
Thank you, Carol. Does somebody wants to comment about Carol comments?
Orlando, perhaps I might just say again, Kieran, I think I mentioned that countries will be making increased use of admin data. So I would suspect that where good administrative data is available, it's inevitably going to get more focused now because it'll be available quickly, we hope. Of course, there is the practical concern about whether the offices providing that can continue to do their work. So it might itself have disruption. But yeah. So, but CPI, I mean, yeah, I think for every operation, it's actually going to be about flexibility for those key operations to enable you to continue and provide whatever representative sample you can. So web scraping is perfectly reasonable. Again, the IMF, ILO, World Bank note referenced this as well. So yeah, it's just about being flexible. That's my initial reflection.
If I may, Rolando?
Yes, please, Philomen.
Yeah, I think, well, a couple of countries have indicated that they would have to postpone their labor force survey. I think, though, it is important for all of us to observe what is happening, in terms of, agencies or corporations that may be laying off their staff, like restaurants, what is happening, in terms of the cruise ship industry. And I think even though we won't do a survey, we should be able to get a lot of useful information, probably more qualitative, maybe some quantitative, where, we could have an idea as to what is happening during this period when we are not having our survey. And I agree in terms of, looking at, for example, what is happening with prices. Some of us would be visiting the supermarket, of course, shopping, and, so that I think in general, we can try to collect as much information as possible from whatever sources are available so that we can have some sort of, substantive evidence, quote unquote, based decision while we await our surveys to start that.
Thank you, Philomen. Who wants to say something?
Good afternoon. This is Statue from Antigua and Barbuda, if I can speak.
Yes, go ahead.
So similarly, we have a challenge in terms of our CPI in regards to collection of data for April. January to March was no problem, but for April, we foresee challenges in terms of closure of businesses and also in terms of restrictions on travel may be intensified, so then therefore officers going out and capturing, as we do it usually through persons going to actual establishments. Few establishments we actually go and collect via phone or electronically. My concern is one is in terms of web scraping, and a lot of the companies may not have an online presence. So how we will collect that type of data. And additionally, in terms of a lot of establishments are closed or will be closed. Hotel sector is a very important sector, and many, if not most of the hotels will be closed for at least for the next few months. So how do we capture that type of information? And then I agree in terms of moving to online, something we like to explore, but this is something that I would think will take a lot of time and should not just be done on an ad hoc basis. I'm also in terms of going forward in terms of our census, although we are going next year and planning field operations next year, in terms of preparations, they will be impacted because of funding availability given the current situation. Resources are very constricted at this point in time.
Thank you. Who wants to say something, Federico, or something about from our colleagues from the price, from the economic section?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, Rolando and colleagues. We have many questions. I think the best way is to build a group to be able to answer the questions that we have and that arise. In the Eurostat document, there is a decision tree to answer the problems in the compilation of the price index, for example. The general policy is to look at alternative prices of our families of products, growth of products, both in the IMF document and in the document.
Yes, Federico?
Hello, hello?
Sí, we hear you.
Yes, now? I will repeat. Yes. We have many questions, and I think the best way is to build a group to be able to answer the question. In the Eurostat document, there is a decision tree to answer the problems in the compilation of the CPI. The general policy is to look for an alternative prices of our families or groups of products, both in the IMF document and the Eurostat document.
Okay, thank you, Federico. And this is an important issue, that the one that mentioned that what we are planning to do is to create. Sorry, somebody is with their microphones open. Can you close it, please? So. Yes, thank you. We are working with the proposal that Federico mentioned regarding to create this group of colleagues from the country just to see and identify this kind of question that is happening in all the countries regarding the closed restaurants, and some other activities that we have to obtain prices and information. So, and we will let you know, and regarding the, well, and in addition, the documents that we have from Eurostat, we are going to share with you in that regard. So, does anybody wants to participate? We will let you know, of course, in mail, just to when we create this group. So just to try to identify these issues, try to respond to the necessities of the countries. So, does anybody wants to make another comment, please?
Yes, good afternoon. This is Jason from St. Martin.
Hello, go ahead, Jason.
Yes, the situation here on St. Martin is quite similar to Antigua's. The price collections for the first quarter, they went pretty well. We had a couple instances where a couple businesses were closed, just as the pandemic reached here as well. The main issue that we have going forward is the HLS that we had planned just before our pilot census. And to be honest, even before this pandemic, we were having trouble securing funds to conduct this HLS. So I think going forward, that will be our main issue, securing funds, and as well as this, of course, a lot of lost businesses and a lot of business closed.
Okay. Does anybody wants to say about about the funding of the HLS in the labor statistics household survey, I suppose? And does anybody wants to say something? I don't know. If you don't have the funding, so you are planning to do something else or something to try to take the information from another survey, for example, the ones that the Jamaica mentioned or something like?
Currently, we are in discussions with our kingdom partners. So Netherlands, Bonaire, Curaçao, Aruba. We are currently in discussions with them as to what is our next step. We first had our discussions last week. We will get back together soon to see exactly what we'll do going forward. But the suggestion from Jamaica, it's pretty well received. I will also discuss that within the team.
Okay, thank you. Any more comments?
Hello, good. This is Halim Brizan from Green. So, in terms of Grenada and the state we are at, well, in terms of the labor force survey, we do quarterly labor force survey, and we trying, before this thing happened, we were trying to push the fourth quarter survey so that we can finish as soon as possible. But that might not be possible. So we think we may have to cancel both the fourth quarter and first quarter, and hopefully find some way of doing the second quarter, which would be collected in July. Hopefully things would blow off by then, but I don't know how long the social distancing will last, so that could be a challenge for us. Currently, as of yesterday, our Governor General has declared a limited state of emergency. So basically, it's only essential services that is operating. So basically, we're all at home. The statistics office, all staff are at home. So there's limited work that we can do because it's 41 days, I guess, in the first instance. So we just have to wait and see. So it is definitely a challenge for us. So that's where we at, just to see. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you remember the country, because we didn't hear that at the beginning?
Grenada.
Thank you.
Hello, this is Gail Archibald from the OECS Commission.
Yes, go ahead.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, colleagues. Thank you so much for sharing the challenges that you're experiencing right now. I thought also that COVID-19 gives us an opportunity to see what we can, what are the positives from that situation. And now that it is clear that the data are so important to what's happening, to measure what's happening now, to determine what's going to happen in the future. This is a good time to think about how we can strengthen our legislation, how we can improve coordination in the national statistical systems, the importance, impressing upon the entities in the NSS, the importance of good administrative data, well classified with the international statistical classifications, among other things. So in addition to looking at how operations are interrupted, let's also think about what opportunities we can glean from this crisis. Thank you.
Thank you, Gail. Any more comments?
Hi, Mr. Chair and colleagues. This is Siobhan from Montserrat. In line with what Grenada said, we are pretty much on a lockdown as well, where only essential services are being undertaken. In terms of the stats office, we are doing very minimal work from home. Our price collection for March, we were unable to conduct any collection at all. In our case, Montserrat is very unique. We don't have much replacement, so to speak. So we're now trying to discuss what can be done for the month of March with regards to our prices. And also we have suspended our HBS, our household budgetary survey.
Thank you. Thank you very much. More comments?
Rolando.
Yes.
Federico.
Yes, Federico.
Just to say about Carol's specific query and in general, the web scraping is a good solution. We need to use all possible alternatives. I understand that we need to make the recommendations in the manuals more flexible.
Thank you, Federico. Any more comments?
Good afternoon, Constantio from Antigua and Barbuda. Just asking quickly for those countries that, as we move to work remotely, what mechanisms in terms of data security and access to their networks have they put in place, policies they put in place in terms of ensuring confidentiality regarding their various data sets, or is just basically just working on things that are not confidential? Thank you.
Thank you. Any more comments? Susie, I wonder if you want to make a comment from Canada on some experience.
Yes, I'd be happy to. What we're doing on our side, we've also kind of shut down most of the activity. We definitely shut down any in-person collection. We usually have about 300 to 350 programs. For the crisis, we're concentrating only on the mission critical one, and that's 21 program. So if you can see the change from 300 programs to 21 program, it includes our labor force survey, it includes our CPI, and it also includes some of the planning exercise for our census round. Our census are scheduled next year, so at least they're not as impacted right now. And the rest of our mission critical are related to the GDP and some of the key economic indicators that are feeding the GDP. On the business side, we were quite lucky of being already mostly collecting information online and from administrative data. So for the data acquisition, it's still okay. We still have the various challenges that have been mentioned during the meeting about some of the conceptual, especially for the price. What does it actually means if stores are closed and you can't get the product, or some of the product, like the challenges about the price and getting information about the price. We have another kind of side project that we're putting through a priority, which is related to trying to find information and ways that we can use the services and the expertise of the NSO to support the public health agencies and the security agencies in their need for information in a way to handle the crisis. So there was some discussion about kind of the advocacy of the NSS and from Gail, using the opportunity to showcase what we can do. It's a little bit what we're trying to do in kind of shifting our role from simple data provider to also kind of providing services. So we're helping gathering the information, cleaning the information, visualizing the information. So there's some work that is being done, kind of shifting a little bit some of the work. Aside from that, there are a lot. I want to echo a lot of what Kieran has said as well. In like right now, there are things that we would have never never considered under normal circumstances, but now there's nothing, so we have to do something. So we're exploring a lot more web scraping. We're exploring panel. We had a panel that was kind of a non-probabilistic panel of volunteers that were not something that we were quite looking into from a methodology point of view, but we're so happy that we have that on the side that we can use a little bit more now. We're also going with some extra question, which we call our fast tracks option, just to monitor and try to get extra information to figure out what is the true meaning of employee and non-employee for our April collection. We've started the collection of our LFS on last Saturday, and we don't have official results yet, but anecdotally, it feels a little bit like some of the example that Kieran, I think, was mentioning. So far, people are at home, so they are answering the phone a little bit more. So early indications seem to say that maybe we'll get some more response, that it's not going to be a non-response issue. I'm saying that with all reserve, because things could change quite drastically before the end of the collection, but the early results were encouraging at least, and we take everything that can be encouraging at this point, because there's a lot of things that are not so encouraging, so we focus on the things that are working a little bit better. Web scraping, I think it's the issue of trying to be flexible, being open in considering option that under normal circumstances we would have never been open to consider. It's clear that we're not under a normal situation, so that's probably the way and how we can do that. Our chief statistician is encouraging us and saying, don't let the crisis go to waste. Use the crisis as an opportunity for other things, for novel things, for innovation. So we're trying to do that. In practice, I'll be very honest, though, it is a challenge. It is a management challenge to have all of the workforce being working from home. We have very limited work that can be done for a large part of our workforce because they cannot access the network. That's how we're protecting confidentiality. We have only a few that can access a secure network because we're getting a bandwidth issue and access issue and software issue and so on. So keeping the morale up is not necessarily an easy task. Keeping the communication with a large staff group that are working from home is also not easy. But on the flip side, we might have some experts available that can help and provide guidance and advice. So I took note of some of the question. I'm trying to see what would be, if there's any things that might be able to share or help out from our neck of the wood. I note in particular that we just did a web scraping a few pager just to try to see what were the advantages and disadvantages, not so much to stop the process, but just to make sure that when we use it, we can do what NSOs are supposed to be doing and do it in a transparent manner, saying we web scrape the information for this because it was the only option, and some of the limitation of the data still remains to do this. I mean, we don't want to hide some of the limitation of the data. So we'll try to see if we can share that. And with that, and so I'm going to, I took note of some of the question. We're going to maybe prepare a little bit more of a summary of what we're doing and what we might be able to offer and to help. And aside from that, we're doing like everyone else, we're just following what's going on in the rest of the world, trying to exchange best practice, trying to see what are the organization like ILO, IMF, the World Bank, what are the recommendations, trying to see if and how we can implement that, and sharing experience and trying to all work together towards the same goal of trying to do our best, understanding that our best is not what our best is usually, but we're all in this together. So that's it. Thanks.
Perfect. Many thanks, Susie. Now, Philomen, I don't know if you want to say something, just some words.
Yes, Rolando, well, we sent a private note to Susie. One of the things that countries, or a couple of things that countries are interested in relative to the labor force survey would be if there are guidelines relative to the use of telephones to conduct that survey. We know that there are guidelines, UN guidelines, the internet, and of course copy, but we did not really find any guidelines relative to telephone survey. The issue that Susie raised also in terms of supporting other agencies, you know, we have asked countries about that. I know in the case of Anguilla, who is not present, that they have been asked to provide some key economic data, you know, relative to the coronavirus. At the Secretariat, what we are doing, we have compiled data on a daily basis in terms of the trajectory of the virus across the region. I've shared some of it with some countries, and of course, well, every day is a day more, and it's interesting to see how the trajectory of the data for the member states and associate members. So that once I could complete that point, I can make that widely available to everyone. I think it's going to be interesting analysis. There will be more pandemic, of course, but also even now in real time, you know, to see what is going on, you know, in terms of the transmission of the coronavirus and how perhaps it could be mitigated. Right. Well, the labor force survey, yes, it is interesting to see what questions can be added to that. So I wait to see from Kieran, what questions can be added so that we could sort of estimate, the impact. But as I said, when you read in the news, you realize that some firms are shutting down, or persons are being laid off in certain industries. So, for example, tourism perhaps has come to a standstill. So already we should have an idea that perhaps we could do some number crunching, to find out, what is happening in terms of employment, probably GDP in some of our countries. Right. So these are some of the thoughts that are going through our mind. I think fundamentally, we should minimize risk in terms of persons going on the field, to collect information, minimize risk, as Halim mentioned in terms of social distancing, and this is the times that we are in, and we just have to see on the other side, how much more we can do in terms of the present situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Philomen. Now I would like to give the voice to the president of the Conference of the Statistics of the Americas, Juan Daniel Oviedo. He's from Colombia. Juan Daniel, can you share us some words regarding this process? Well, this pandemia.
Thank you, Rolando. I would like to thank you all for being here in this video conference. It's indeed one of the main challenging situations that we national statistics officers are facing right now. And I think that sharing our concerns and our doubts and our perspectives or initiatives of solutions that we are making here is something that is going to be very helpful, because it shows that we are not alone as far as facing these methodological challenges. I think that we have to take advantage of the transfer knowledge or the knowledge transfer platform, of the body of knowledge platform that we have at the ECLAC. For example, yesterday we took several methodological decisions here in Colombia, and we made it public to all the country and specialists, because all the analysts and the specialized users are concerned about how are we going to continue measuring CPI or even the national account system. And the more challenging situation right now is the methodology to follow in our household surveys. So I think that this is something very enlightening. And as Susie was saying, we should collaborate continuously under these situations and under these circumstances, because it's urgent to find solutions, and the only way to find solutions is to facing or to place right questions that we have to solve from the methodological perspective. So I value very much the initiative of the ECLAC, and more importantly, we have to use the body of knowledge platform that Javier has exposed to us in several meetings in the past. And we have to I think that I suggest respectfully that we have to keep performing these conferences and this video conference at least once a week, in order to see which is the statistics office that has placed a solution to a methodological challenge, and how we can collaborate in assessing the solution, and probably to find a common framework under which all Latin American and Caribbean countries we could face in the right way and with sound methodological solutions these important challenges that our countries and the global society is facing right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Juan Daniel. And I just want to close this session just thanking our all the participants, and in special our colleagues from the International Labour Organization, Rafael, Marcela, and Kieran. So we have this, we create this initiative with you, and we want to thank all the support, and in particular the labor statistics surveys, and with all of you. And let me tell you that we are going to share all the documents, and the two documents that we have, one from Eurostat, another one from the IMF. And so we are also going to create this board of experts just to deal with these challenges that we are trying to respond. And in this, we are going to ask Canada just to support us, and just to let you know that we are going to put all this information in our knowledge transfer network that we have together, and we are going to send you the link for this knowledge transfer network that we create, and that mentioned that Juan Daniel mentioned. And with all this, I want to thank Philomen. Thank you very much. All the colleagues from CARICOM, some from the other organizations, OECS too, and our colleagues from the ECLAC in the Caribbean. Abdullahi, thank you very much for your presence, and so we are and we thank you for all your support too. And with this, I want to say thank to all of you. And so we are going to try to have this minute. We are going to send it to you, and in that regard, we are going to continue with this process, and maybe we are going to face another survey, and next week maybe, or in 2 weeks, just to know and to have this continuity with this knowledge transfer network, just to continue working together. So safe for all of you. So take care, and so try to have our best face for this pandemia, and let's try to work together in this statistical side. Thank you very much, and thank you.
Thank you, Orlando.
Thank you all. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.